Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome to the next smart discussion. Today, special guest, really an CX hero, Ian Golding is with me. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Greg. And you're always so kind to me. But I'm not sure anyone's ever called me their hero, but I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you so much.
I was not sure about hero or pope, and then I said, okay, let's try with
I don't know if smoke will come off when I finally pass away, but you never know.
No, thank you very much, and it's really great to have you here. I know your schedule is extremely busy, and you find time also to have such chats, and I'm really thankful. Perhaps for the people who don't know you, could you please introduce yourself?
Well, Greg, it's so kind of you to invite me, first of all. We've known each other for a very long time. I can't even remember when we first met each other, but it's such a pleasure to be able to talk with you, but so everyone else can hear the conversation. As you know, I am a customer experience specialist. That's the way I describe myself, very pedantically and quite insistently, because whilst I get called all sorts of things, my belief has always been that I'm not an expert. I'm someone who never wants to stop learning with this stuff. And so that's very important to me. My background's actually in financial services. I started in banking. I spent the worst 6 months of my life in outsourcing. I then moved into food service and then eventually into online retail. So I've got quite a long background in the corporate world before I then moved independent in February 2012. So 9 years ago. And my life has just been mad ever since. So prior to the pandemic, as you know, I spent half of my life on an aeroplane and half of my life somewhere around the world, helping lots of different organizations to not just understand the theory of customer experience, but how to practically apply it. And I do consider myself to be incredibly lucky to have been to the places I've been and seen the things I see. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about sharing knowledge, because people want knowledge, they need knowledge, and I'm very, very open to people having as much as they can so they can make this happen themselves.
As you're saying, you're extremely lucky that you can share that, but for me, it was a great honor to participate to one of your masterclasses, because it was really, let's say, the ignition of really this passion about customer experience, how you do that, how you're transmitting your values and the relevance of customer experience. It's really outstanding. And I really enjoyed also that how you explained how your part of the career that you worked at GE impacted your view on customer experience. Could you please elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, 100%. I was very fortunate, again, I believe, to have been able to work at GE when Jack Welch was still CEO, which gives away my age. But GE, to those who don't know, used to be one of the largest organizations in the world and one of the most customer-centric in the world. And so when I joined GE in the 90s, it was just transformative for me, because they were so sophisticated, they were so clever, they were so open and honest about what they were trying to do. And I'd not seen that anywhere else. And they were also very transparent. You know, everyone knew who the leaders were and everyone talked to each other and the communication was amazing. But I think something that also had a lasting effect on me is that they were very, very focused on developing their people. In fact, when I was at GE, there was a saying that GE was the best organization in the world at training other organizations' future business leaders, because they invested so much in you as a person. And I very confidently say it changed my working life. You know, that is what unleashed the monster that people see today, because you know, Jack Welch's mantra at the time was that, you know, we do the right thing for the customer, we make more money. It's not complicated. And it was where I was introduced into the world of process improvement and Lean Six Sigma. And it just all made so much sense to me. And I think that's the key. What I realized is that if you are fortunate enough to work in an organization that is led by someone like Jack Welch, you realize how businesses can be run. Unfortunately, more often than not, that isn't what we see. But it allowed me to see the art of the possible. And from that moment on, it has been my either stated or unstated mission to help organizations understand how they can turn this essence of wanting to be customer centric into a practical reality.
And I think you define customer experience as a science, and you developed also this concept. And perhaps could you please explain why you think that it's a science?
Well, let me tell you the story. And I not many people know this, but I think it's important to give the credit to the person that inspired me to call it that. And I was in South Africa a few years ago, and I've done a lot of work across Africa, including South Africa. And I was delivering one of my masterclasses for a financial services organization. And it's quite a big group, I think about 28 people around the table. They're all lovely people, very nice. And there was one lady in the meeting who was very smartly dressed, immaculately dressed. And she was incredibly nice and polite, but didn't really say very much throughout the 2 days. And as I was closing the session, this lady stood up and said, "Can I just pause a second because I'd like to say something?" Okay, well, have I done something wrong? And she said, I wasn't completely honest with you when the session started, but I'm actually a member of our executive leadership team. And I wanted to come here because customer experience is my passion. But, what you've made me realize is that, and what I didn't realize before is that customer experience really is a science. And behind that science is a heart. And as soon as she said it, it was one of those moments where you think, blimey, but she's right, because the reason she said it is that it allowed her to understand that sitting behind this are skills and competencies and capabilities. And actually, we don't know what they are. We think we know what they are, but we don't. And when you hear it all coming together, that's when you realize that this is actually a scientific approach to transforming and managing a business. And that's where it came from. And the interesting thing, she is actually a very humble lady. So she allowed me to use that quote in my book, which I have, but she asked me to never reveal her name. So I've always stayed true to that. I've never revealed her actual name, but she's a brilliant lady, and it's her that really is the reason why I now call it a science.
Now we know the secret, and it's great. And I think in one of the last discussion that I followed you. You mentioned something that I think it's really key for all CX practitioners, and it's about, yes, CX is a science, but it's not rocket science. And my question would be, if it's not rocket science, why are we where we are and not where we should be?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And as you know, because you've heard me speak so many times, I'm very sincere in what I say. Customer experience is something that is not difficult to understand. Now, there are certain competencies that are technical, and so there is a greater depth of knowledge that's required. But in essence, it's not difficult to understand. And the simpler you can make it, the more practical it becomes. I think fundamentally the problem is that corporate organizations over many, many years have radically overcomplicated what they do. And some of that is to do with a lack of thinking. And so rather than redesigning processes, they just add and add and add. And, it ends up with such a complex web that, people can't see the wood for the trees anymore. But part of it is also a human stroke political issue, because one of the problems I think as a human race is that if you're busy, that's good. That means that I'm needed. And so some people actually, that they're quite happy with the complexity because I've got lots to do, which means I'm needed, which means I've got a job. Now, they might not overtly say it, but I think that there is a large element of that. And so when you talk to people about simplification, that they get it, but actually in reality, they don't really want it to happen. They think they want it to happen, but they don't. And this actually translates into customer experience change, because we see so little change, because ultimately when push comes to shove, no, we'll stay as we are. So I think there are a number of issues, but that the irony is that the simpler you keep your approach to customer experience, the more effective it is. But the irony is that keeping it simple is very difficult in complex organizations.
And I fully agree, because at the end, it's always, if my daily schedule is full, then I am doing something important, I am working, right. And there is not really time to think about simplification. And when you start speaking about simplification, there is 200 priorities. No, we need to do that. We need to announce the product. And this is extremely difficult.
And let me be honest with you, I'm just as guilty, but you use the word that is a word I use over and over and over again, and that word is think. The problem is that I think we've evolved into a world where we don't think, because we don't give ourselves time to think. And, when you look at corporate organizations, you want to get a meeting with a senior leader. No, they're too busy, because they've got meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, but they're not thinking, they're just attending meetings. But, it always reminds me, again, back to my GE days, when we were very, very focused on doing a lot of time and motion studies, because the amount of non-value added activity day to day is so significant that we needed to just identify it and stop doing it. And, I've mentioned to a number of businesses over the years, just for a week, do a time and motion study, and you will realize just how much unnecessary work you're doing. But, yeah, you're right, Ian, you're right. But they never do it.
And I think this is really key, because thinking needs also quite a lot of energy. And therefore, you need to have time to think about and to prepare for that. And I had a discussion with a former CEO, and he told me the most important decisions were not taken during this board of director meetings, but outside of them, during lunch, or when they had a walk after lunch, because they had time to discuss, to find ways to find solution for the companies, and therefore they were able then to decide.
Again, it's not rocket science.
Exactly. And back also to this timing components, what you're saying, we are all extremely busy, or we think that we are extremely busy, and also the C-suite is extremely busy. And what I think it's really, really interesting, and I would like to hear again what you think about it. You mentioned you're doing your master classes, and in your trainings, if I understand well, or I remember well, you said roughly 2% of the participants are from the C-suite, and all the others are normal people like me.
Yes.
What's your view on that?
It's, I think, a very interesting fact, because it is a fact. More than 15,000 people in 9 years, less than 2% of them representing the C-suite. And it will always fascinate me. Now, I just finished a masterclass with a large multimedia company, and I had the CFO attend. And, when they introduced themselves, I almost like, really? Because I'm so surprised that the CFO is there. But, I have to make a real point about saying just how important that is. Now, what's fascinating about this is that, as you've heard me say, why is that? Is it because they know all of this already? Is it because they don't care? Or is it just because they don't think it's important enough to have the time to develop their knowledge? It's a combination of all of those things. But what always will fascinate me is that, among other things, I'm the course director for the Chartered Institute of Marketing for Customer Experience. And that's the only time where I will sometimes get very senior leaders from Amazon attend my workshops. And the reason I say it is that, I always think, why are you here? And they say, well, because we never stop learning. You know, we need that. There's got to be something that we can do better. You know, there are always things we can do better. And I think that's the answer, really. It almost goes back to that point about we don't give our people time, you know. But if I come back again to what happened to me at GE you didn't have a choice. You had to learn. You had to have a developmental plan. And it didn't matter what role you were in. Everyone had, you know, I probably in my 4 years at GE spent 7-8 months in the classroom, you know, and that's gone. I think largely in many organizations it's gone because we don't have time for all of that. But then we can't complain when our organizations are lacking the ability and capability to advance and transform.
And I think this is also a really important topic, and there is also this joke that the CFO is speaking to the CEO and is telling to him, do you know how much we spend on education from our company? And the CEO say, yes, but think about people staying with us 10 years without additional education or further education. What will happen to us and to our development? And this is extremely important. Another topics that you are always mentioning, and it's really relevant, it's I hope that I'm saying that in a proper way. It's you're saying one of the most important competencies defined by the CXPA is measurement.
Yeah.
Why is this?
Do you know, I've said it for years. I said it when I was in a customer experience role in the organizations I worked in, and I will always say it. Measurement is, in my opinion, the most important competency of all, because customer experience should be a fact-based methodology. You know, ultimately, the intended desire of focusing on the customer experience is by improving the experience, improving the financial performance of the organization. That's the point. You know, the point is that if we can better deliver our purpose, we can deliver a better experience to our customers, we will be more successful and grow sustainably. So if you're going to be able to do that, you've got to have a clear understanding of what is it that you need to improve? What is it that will have the greatest impact on improving customer perception? And by doing that, you then improve financial performance. Now, the problem is that too many organizations, whether it be intentional or unintentional, have convinced themselves that this is about measuring things to get scores, you know, and the scores tell us that we're doing a great job. But that's not the point. You know, a score is an outcome of measuring, but the primary reason for measuring what you do is so you can understand what you need to focus on to get better, not to navel gaze, not to massage egos, not to pay bonuses. And this, unfortunately, has got lost in the ether somewhere, you know, and it's one of the reasons why I, as you know, preach about the need to not just map customer journeys, but to manage the customer journey, of which measurement is a core part, because it's measuring the journey that allows us to see where those opportunities are. And the biggest gap with measurement, or the biggest issues, is that firstly, the way businesses are measuring customer perception, so VOC, is unfortunately leading far too many to draw the wrong conclusion. And that's because with this obsession for scores, many are measuring in a way that is not giving them a true representative understanding of their customer base. But the other issue is that just measuring VOC only tells you the effect of what you're doing. It doesn't tell you what's causing it. And if we want to try and improve customer perception, we've got to understand the relationship between what we do and the way the customer feels about what we do. And unfortunately, that's not happening. And so businesses measure lots of stuff, but they measure what's important to them. What they're not measuring are the things that they do that enable the customer to interact with them and the relationship between those two. And so, you know, this is why education is so important, because all of that stuff exists. It's all there. And most organizations have people that have the ability to use all of this, but they're just not doing it. And that is because there is a lack of understanding.
I think I fully agree. And taking the first point that you were mentioning about this number, these figures, instead of focusing on the feedback, it's you have a scorecard, you need to check the numbers. And basically what I am also hearing in the market, it's now that we need to save money, everybody needs to save, get more efficient. The discussion starts, oh, you have a good NPS rate. How many FTs can we deduct in your contact center for the transactional NPS? And we decrease the score by, let's say, 10 points without impacting really our financial goals. And this is the really big issue. On the other side, perhaps, do you have some suggestion what company should do or could do? I know it's only a short podcast, not a 2 days masterclass, but what is possible to do to really focus on what the customers see?
Yeah, it is a challenge, because with that lack of understanding, the problem is that the decision as to what the primary metric should be is often not the decision of the people driving the customer experience. And so, when you go to a board of directors and say, the way we're measuring this wrong, that they're not going to thank you for saying that. And, I was once invited into an organization because the head of customer experience knew that the way they were measuring it was wrong, but she couldn't convince the board of directors. So she asked me to come and help her. But the thing is, they knew she was right. They just didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear it, because that would impact their bonus. So, it's a massive challenge. I believe that the important thing that customer experience professionals need to focus on, and this may be a segue to another question you might want to ask me, is that there are many situations like this where we're going to be very frustrated by the lack of understanding of leadership. And the danger is if we become too adversarial and start arguing and start, all it does is build up a very big wall between us and them, and we're never going to win the argument. What we've got to try and do is let them massage their egos with vanity metrics. But what we've got to do is find other ways of getting the message across. So with something like Net Promoter, for example, what I will always encourage any organization that has this kind of issue is let them report the NPS score if they want to get their bonus. But why don't you actually create a narrative around the proportion of detractors? So when you're communicating, don't communicate the score, talk only about detractors. What percentage of detractors do you have, and why are they detractors? And just change the conversation, because people will then listen to that. Right, well, how do we reduce the number of detractors? Oh, okay, well, and so I think we've just got to pick our battles in the right way. And having a battle in that situation where it's affecting remuneration, you're going to lose. And in my last full-time role on the inside at an online retailer, our primary measure was customer satisfaction. It wasn't NPS. But every time a new leader came into the business, they would say to me, why are we measuring NPS? And I'd always say, well, we are. Or why are we not using the NPS score? And, I created a presentation actually that I would always roll out over and over again to explain why we were doing what we were doing. But this is just normal, and it's what, unfortunately, we will face. But that's why we've got to choose our battles wisely and just change the narrative a little bit, so people focus on exactly what needs to be done rather than worrying too much about the score.
And I think this is one great example. The other example that I can remember from your masterclass was also the list of the 10 CX improvements, meaning you have the list of the 10 and then you can go through. It's clear it's difficult to prioritize them, but at the end, if you share also this list, and this is often linked Absolutely. To the detractors, then it helps too.
100%. And with any focus on improvement, making sure that you have named who is accountable for that priority, who's accountable for that improvement. That also radically changes people's focus when they see their name next to it.
Sure, accountability is extremely important.
Absolutely.
But before speaking about accountability, perhaps also linked to this topic, who owns customer experience in a company? You are doing the example again of the small team, 2-3 people in a company of 20,000 people, and it's not possible that they are owner of the customer experience. What's your view on that?
So this is again a question we all get asked very regularly, and the standard answer, which is also the textbook answer, is that everyone is responsible for the customer experience, and that's absolutely true. In terms of the practicality of managing the customer experience in an organization, there is no one way to do it. And it very much depends on the organization, the size, the scale, the culture, a number of factors. What I always say to people is that in an ideal world, which we know doesn't exist, I believe that the person or people who are driving the direction of the approach to customer experience should be independent of any function that has responsibility for the customer journey. So in other words, if the head of customer experience reports into customer service, they're to a degree marking their own homework. If you report into marketing, it's the same. I believe that the person driving customer experience should be completely independent of all of that. However, it's also important that what we've got to try and create is a situation where the business understands that just because customer experience is on our job title, it doesn't mean that the customer experience is ours. And this is the game that we've got to play. Ultimately, what we need to be doing is developing capability, developing competency, setting the direction, and holding the mirror up. That's ideally what we should be doing. But we should be doing that in collaboration with the business. We're not there to point fingers. We're not there to patronize people or shout at them. We're there to help them understand, well, these are the facts. This is what we need to do to address it. And this is how we can best approach it. So that's the ideal world. But unfortunately, as we know, we don't live in an ideal world. But I think that the key message is whatever environment anyone is in, making sure there is an understanding that the customer experience is not our responsibility, it's everyone's.
And I think based on what you're saying, you also defined the 7th competency of customer experience. And I think this is something that I would love if you share it also in this podcast.
I so believe this. Now, as you know, I've been on the inside and done it. You've been on the inside and done it. And, we've earned the bruises and the scratches and the scrapes that come with doing it. Being a customer experience professional is really hard, and it's very different on the inside to being a consultant. You and I have spent years pushing water uphill, on the inside, because you're there trying to drag people kicking and screaming. And, the funny thing is, when you're on the inside, even though it's your job title, people don't really want to listen to you. When you're a consultant, it's different, because people ask you to come in and tell us how to do it, Ian. And so suddenly you're different, but we're not. We're the same person. And a story that I may have told you that I tell a lot of people is that when I was head of customer experience in my retailer, I was struggling to convince my boss of something. I can't remember specifically what. And I was already quite good friends with Bruce Temkin by that point, one of the co-founders of the CXPA. And so I emailed Bruce and said, Bruce, please help me. He's just not listening to me. Will you help? And so Bruce did what I do. He said, yeah, of course. Yeah, just let's get on a call and we'll talk about it. And we had about 45 minutes on a web call with Bruce. And Bruce said almost word for word what I'd been saying for years. And at the end of the call, my boss turned around to me and said, wow, that was amazing. And, this is the reality. But that's why I've said for years that, yes, there are competencies that we need to have a good working knowledge of. And the CXPA has defined those that I believe sets the standard for the profession. But the 7th competency, which isn't stated, but it's the unstated competency, is that we need to have the courage, the resilience, the persistence, and the strength to keep going whatever is thrown at us. This is, I believe, to be one of the most difficult professions in the world, because we are often in an environment where people don't want us to be there. They don't want to thank us for doing this. They don't want to change. And that's why the best customer experience professionals in the world, they don't do this for the money. You know, that there are probably much more effective ways of getting money than being a customer experience professional. But we do this because we believe passionately it's the right thing to do. And as a result, we will keep going. You know, it doesn't matter. We expect these things to be thrown at us, but we keep going. And it's why I believe that the customer experience community is a very special one, because, you know, there are lots of us that we help each other. We talk to each other. We will do whatever we can to support each other. And we don't do that for financial reward. We do it because we know that that support is vital, because very, very often it can feel as though we're the only people on earth that get it. And so I'd love for that sort of attitude and state of mind to be a seventh competency, but it's the unwritten one that I will always refer to.
Perhaps it will be written at some point in time, Ian's competency or something like that.
Yeah. Although some people might say it's the madman competency, but you know, I don't know.
It can be. I think customers are important, and will be important. We all agree that customer experience, it's not a knife, but it's something that was there, is there, and will be there. What do you foresee in customer experience? Everybody is speaking about technology, artificial intelligence, and so on. But at the end, we are always in a human-to-human business. What's your view?
Yeah, again, I'm asked that question a lot. In fact, March last year, just before lockdown, I was in Brazil. And a journalist asked me, you know, what's the future of customer experience? Is it going away? And, you know, I will say exactly what you said. Well, actually, it was always here. It will never go away because it will always be here. And what I said to her, and I still believe that to be the case, is that the future of customer experience is actually in the past. And what I mean by that is that experiences going back to the beginning of commerce were about human-to-human interaction. That's what it was. And the experience is still about human-to-human interaction. The only difference is that we now have such a wonderfully, unbelievably amazing advance in technology that we're able to make those interactions easier, faster, more accessible. But the problem is that far too many have seen digital technology as a way of eliminating human interaction to save money, you know, but the reality is what many are doing is making experiences worse as a result. And so I think what I identified 2.5, 3 years ago is that there was an increasing recognition of the importance of the employee experience. It was starting to become much more prominent. Now, I know you've judged the Employee Experience Awards, so you know it's not a new thing, but it's sort of grown in prominence over the years. And the pandemic has, I think, accelerated that. People realize that, you know what, as we send people home, we've got to look after our employees right now, but because if we don't treat them well, they're not going to be able to deal with the customer. And so I think one of the positives of the pandemic is, yes, we've seen the power of technology, but I think it's reminded us of the importance of human interaction. By not being able to physically be with people, I think it has brought a little bit of humanity back again. You know, not everyone has noticed that, not everyone has realized it, but I think even if only a small proportion have realized that we've got to become a bit more human, a bit more empathetic, then that cannot be a bad thing. So I think the future is moving towards HX. So not just customer experience, but that marriage between customer experience and employee experience being much more closely monitored. But the reality is, Greg, is that there is a very, very long way to go. You know, all of these organizations that have been talking about it for years, they don't understand the science still. And so, I think you and I hopefully will be busy for a long time to come.
Sure, and I think this is also our role, as you said, of CX professional, and it's not 100-meter sprint, but it's a marathon, and we are ready to go this marathon. Really, thank you very much. It was great to discuss the content, but now it's time to learn a bit more about the human side of Ian, and perhaps you are everywhere. You are at the awards. You do your masterclass. You wrote an outstanding book. How can you ensure to have a satisfactory work-life balance or life-work balance?
What a question. Now, I know you're recording this, so I need to be careful just in case my wife watches it. But it's a very good question, because I'm not very good at managing my work-life balance, if I'm totally honest with you. I'm a very focused person, and I get, to a degree, slightly obsessed with certain things. And I realized during my GE days, I think, that doing the right thing for the customer wasn't actually my job. It was just sort of who I was. It was my vocation. And I've been, again, quite lucky to sort of evolve it. So that is what it has become. But the problem is, when you're driven by a passion, it can consume you. And prior to the pandemic, I was flying between 100 and 150 times a year. I was everywhere and anywhere apart from being at home. And, my family would see me at the weekend. Sometimes they'd only see me on a Saturday. And, you get to a point where something has got to break. And part of the problem is that, again, related to some of the things we said, I want to help people. But you sometimes forget, when you're helping people, that you mustn't forget the people that are the most important. So, ironically, this very strange year that or 15 months that we've been living in has been a very big wake-up call for me to do what I preach, and that is to just stop and think. What am I trying to do here, and who am I doing it for, and why am I doing it? So I think, as I said right at the very beginning, I don't know everything. I'm learning every day. And, what I've learned during this last 15 months is that I've been able to do exactly the same things that I do, but still see my family as well. And yes, circumstances made it this way, but I'm actually even busier than I was before, because all I've done is replace the traveling time with working time. So, what it's told me is that I can have the confidence to, manage my schedule more effectively, so I don't put the most important people in my life last. And that is what I was doing. And I think it's why, interestingly, I've suffered with mental health issues during the last few years, where I felt very down. I felt exhausted. People don't see that because I'm a very good actor, so people wouldn't know, but it's been tough. And I think, this has been one of those periods in our lives where not everyone is as lucky as me. I've been lucky to carry on working. I'm very lucky to have a family, and there are people in a far worse situation than me. And that's why I do believe that we do have to look after each other. Not just our clients, but, our peers, our friends, because life is tough. It's really difficult. And we must never forget that there's a reason for doing this. And the reason is so we can enjoy the kind of life that we want us and our families to have. And, if we've forgotten that, and we're feeling tired or vulnerable or whatever, that's the point to stop and reach out to someone. Because there are people who will always have a very sympathetic ear, will help you to just get sense of where you are and recalibrate. So, this pandemic, I think, has been terrible in many ways, but in other ways, it's been a very, very important period to get us to just rethink, why do we do what we do?
It's really an outstanding what you are saying, and at the end, facing similar issues. In Switzerland, it's public holiday today. It's late evening, and I am doing podcasting instead of being with my family. But for sure, at the end, it's a balance between family time, working time, and if you are doing a job that you're really passionate at, then it's something that you are not really checking. Oh, now I need to go. I need
Exactly.
to stop the discussion, and therefore I can understand that. The last few questions, and then I leave you time for your family. One question is that I always ask is, do you have a book that you say this is something I would suggest to the audience to have a look at, to read, because it's really important? And for sure, behind of you, I am seeing the Customer What book. It's an outstanding book. I have it also with me. I'm really waiting for meeting you again so that you can sign it for me.
Absolutely. Well, that's without question. There are lots of books out there, and I'm actually a big advocate of books that are written in a way that it really helps people. Now, the book that is mentioned to me more than any other is Outside In by Kerry Bodine, which I think is it's very well written, and it is always worth a read. But the most recent book that I had the pleasure of writing the foreword to it is a book written by a very good friend of mine and a peer of mine, The Customer Journey Playbook. And the reason I like it is because it's written, again, for the right reason. And it's really simple, really practical. The author is one of the nicest human beings on earth, a man called Jerry Angrave. And I think if anyone is interested in journey mapping and even wants to just validate the way they're doing it, that's worth investing in.
Thank you, Ian. And the second last question is, if somebody wants to contact you, what's the best way?
Well, some people would say you can't avoid me on LinkedIn, but that's not intentional. But I'm always happy to have a chat with people. So if they want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, they can email me directly at ian@ijgolding.com, or they can come to you, Greg, and you can point them in my direction. But as you know, I will always say you're never alone. And if you need anything, just reach out. That this is the kind of community that will help you. And if you want me to answer a question, reach out to me. But they also need to remember that Gregorio is rather good at this as well, so they need to reach out and speak to you too.
Thank you, Ian. And this is, I think, what I really like from the CX community, that we are helping each other, and new people can learn from experts or specialists, sorry, like you. and that's clear. This is my very last question. It's the golden nugget. It's something that we discussed or something new that you would like to share with the audience. This is Ian's golden nugget.
What a question. Ian's golden nugget. I would say that, and I have said this many times to people that have worked for me on the inside, and I will now say it to consultants all around the world as well, or anyone working in customer experience roles. If you are worried about anything that you're doing, you're worried about how is it going to be received? Is it the right thing to do? Am I going to get told off? Do I need to get permission? My mantra has always been, if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, you've got nothing to lose. Don't overanalyze. If this is totally without politics, you're not doing it for you to massage your ego. If it's the right thing for the company, the right reason, just do it. Do it, because it will never get done otherwise. If you ask permission to do things, you will get very often a negative response, because people don't understand enough to give you permission. So if you know it's for the right reason, do it.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I'm not commenting your golden nugget because it's Ian's golden nugget. However, afterwards, I will massage my ego, because one of my target of 2021 was interviewing you, and now I did that.
Brilliant. Well, I have to say, Greg, it's such a pleasure talking to you, because we just have we could talk all day, I'm sure. But I do want to compliment you, because I think your interview style is brilliant. So I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. It was also a great pleasure, and I hope that's also for the audience. They had so much fun as I had, because it's always outstanding having a chat with you about customer experience. But I know you are also able to discuss about other topics. But Absolutely. It was an outstanding discussion. Thank you very much, Ian.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Greg. And enjoy your family now.
Sure, that's what I will do. And the last thing is, thank you very much. Bye bye. Grazie mille. Arrivederci.